You've always felt it, that strange pull beneath the surface of things, a quiet whisper in the soul, not of where you're going, but where you've already been, and deeper still, the sense that this time is different. This life doesn't feel like another chapter in a long saga. It feels like the final verse in a sacred song. Not because you've mastered perfection, not because everything is peaceful, but because something inside you no longer seeks what it used to. The cravings, the striving, the clinging have grown quieter, and in their place, a stillness has begun to bloom. A knowing, a remembering. What if this isn't just another life? What if this is the one where you finally step out of the cycle? There are signs, not loud or obvious, but hidden like symbols in a dream you half remember upon waking. You don't need to believe in past lives to feel their fingerprints, because if your soul is nearing its final earthly incarnation, you are already experiencing things that defy logic, and yet feel more real than anything this world offers. You've felt the ache that has no name. You've seen behind the curtain, if only for a moment. You've begun to release not from exhaustion, but from a truth too deep to deny. This is your last dance with Earth. Sign 1, the stranger within. It begins with something so quiet, you almost don't notice it at first. You feel like a visitor here, even in the most intimate moments. Laughter, love, celebration. There's a part of you that remains slightly apart. You are here, fully participating, but never fully attached. As if your roots were never meant to go too deep this time. You play the roles. You follow the rhythms. You nod when others nod, cry when others cry, celebrate when the world tells you to celebrate. But something inside remains still, not out of numbness, but out of knowing. You've done this before. You've worn these skins. You've chased these dreams. And now, it's all beginning to feel like déjà vu, not in the mind, but in the soul. While others build empires, you long for something else. Not more, but less. Not louder, but quieter. Not power, but peace. It's not disconnection. It's not despair. It's the recognition that what once captivated you no longer holds the same magic. You've seen through it. Sign 2, seeing the illusion. Not as a philosophy, not as something you read or heard, but as a direct, lived experience. You watch people argue over titles, over money, over belief systems, and you feel a quiet sadness, like watching children fight over a toy they'll forget by morning. You don't judge them. You remember being them. You remember the hunger to be seen, to be right, to be someone. But now, the hunger has softened. You no longer need to win the game, because you've remembered that the game was never the point. And the moment that realization settles in your chest, your desires begin to change. Not through effort, but through a kind of soul-level erosion. Sign 3, the quiet dissolving of desire. The ambitions that once gave you meaning now seem like shadows. You no longer chase enlightenment. You no longer run from darkness. You are learning to sit in the center of the fire without flinching. Not because you're brave, but because you've been burned so many times. The flame no longer frightens you. What once stirred you into motion now moves past you like wind across still water. You don't need to grab it. You don't need to follow it. There is no longer a destination. There is only presence. You begin to notice that even your spiritual seeking begins to fade. You don't read as much. You don't chase teachers. You don't feel the need to understand it all, because a deeper understanding is beginning to open, one that doesn't speak in words. You don't want answers anymore. You want silence. You want the sacred. You want to sit beside the mystery and not disturb it. Others may not understand. They may ask why you're no longer striving, why you're not pushing, why you've become so quiet. But how do you explain that your silence is not emptiness? It is fullness? That your stillness is not withdrawal? It is completion. You begin to see beauty in things you once overlooked. A dying leaf, a crack in the pavement, the way light falls across a stranger's face. You are no longer seeking meaning, you are breathing it. And with every breath, something old within you exhales. Not in grief, not in fear, but in peace. You've carried so much for so long, and finally, you are starting to let it all go. Not as surrender, but as return. Sign 4. The sacred weariness. Not from this day, not from the weight of work or responsibility, but from the long arc of lifetimes. A quiet exhaustion that lives in your bones, as if your soul has been walking for centuries and finally sees the path fading into light. It's not despair, it's not disinterest. It's a soft sigh from the soul, a whispered knowing. I've been here before, and I've carried enough. You don't wake up dreading life. You simply carry a stillness that others may mistake for sadness, when in truth, it is peace wearing the face of fatigue. You've been the warrior. You've been the lover, the mother, the king, the wanderer. And now, without needing another title, you are ready to put down the armor. There's nothing left to prove, not to yourself, not to the world. And with that, a kind of grace begins to move through you, not because you have nothing to give, but because you've already given lifetimes. Sign 5. When the universe whispers back, you begin to notice the dance, the timing of things, the soft alignments. A thought becomes a conversation. A question becomes a sign. You wonder about someone, and they appear. You speak your truth, and the world shifts around it. Synchronicity becomes your native language. It no longer surprises you, because you've started to remember how creation responds to consciousness, not as magic, but as design. There's a quiet co-creation happening beneath the surface, one that doesn't require effort, one that moves in rhythm with your presence. And the more you listen, the more the veil thins between thought and form. It's not that life obeys your will. It's that your will has begun to harmonize with life itself. You aren't here to dominate the dream. You're here to remember that you are the dreamer. And suddenly, nothing is random. Everything, even the heartbreaks, arrives with quiet intelligence. Sign 6, the softening toward death. Not in fear, not in avoidance, but in a gentle acceptance that rises without invitation. You no longer shudder at the thought of endings. You've walked that threshold before, through fire, through silence, through lives with names you no longer remember. Others speak of death as if it's a cliff, but you feel it as a doorway. There is no dread, only a still awareness that this body is not all you are, that this life is not the whole story. And when the time comes, whenever it does, you will meet it not with resistance, but with reverence. Because some part of you already knows what it feels like to be held by the formless again. You've tasted that silence before breath, and in that remembrance, the fear begins to dissolve. Not because you know what's next, but because you trust that whatever comes will be a continuation of the same sacred unfolding you felt all along. Sign 7, when seeking becomes stillness. There was a time when your soul searched tirelessly for meaning, for truth, for something that would finally quiet the ache Books, teachings, ceremonies, mantras. You devoured them, not out of curiosity, but because something inside you was starving. But now, the hunger has softened. You still love the sacred. You still revere the mystery, but you are no longer chasing it. The path has curled inward. You no longer look for signs in the stars. You begin to notice them in your breath, in the way you can sit in silence now without needing to fill it. There is peace in not knowing, not the peace of ignorance, but the peace of a soul that finally trusts what it cannot name. You no longer need to become anything, because you are beginning to remember who you've always been. Sign 8, dissolving the identity. You once called you. You begin to feel yourself slipping beyond the edges of your name, beyond your story, beyond all the labels you once clung to. Son, healer, artist, seeker. They don't disappear. They just become thinner, lighter, more transparent. You are no longer the character in the dream. You are the awareness behind it. It's not detachment. It's expansion. You still live your life. You still speak, eat, love, work. But something has shifted. You are watching from a place that doesn't move, from a center that has no form. You can feel the mask, but you're no longer lost inside it. And for the first time, that brings relief. Not because the self was bad, but because you finally know it was never the whole story. There's a presence within you that doesn't rise or fall. It doesn't need a name. It doesn't need a plan. It simply is. And as you rest in that presence, life begins to feel less like a task and more like a sacred unfolding. Sign 9, the weight of the world becomes your own heartbeat. You begin to feel things that don't belong to you, or at least didn't seem to. The suffering of a stranger, the grief of the earth, the sorrow of a child across the world. But it doesn't overwhelm you. It softens you. You are no longer separated by story. The illusion of me and them begins to dissolve. When someone hurts, you feel it, not as pity, but as recognition. When someone heals, you feel it, not as joy for them, but as joy through you. There is no boundary between your soul and the world anymore. And with that, compassion ceases to be a practice. It becomes your natural state, even when no one is looking, even when there is no reward. You love because to not love would feel like forgetting yourself. You don't need to announce it. You don't need applause. Your very presence becomes a quiet medicine for the invisible wounds you now see everywhere. And you offer it not as a healer, but as a remembrance that we are all made from the same light, just shaped by different shadows. Sign 10, when patterns fall away without a fight. You begin to notice the shift not in what you're doing, but in what no longer pulls at you. Old habits dissolve. Triggers that once burned now pass through you like smoke. Wounds that defined you seem to lose their edges. Not because you forced yourself to heal, not because you finally figured it out, but because you've outgrown them from the inside. Without fanfare, without therapy, without ceremony, the patterns break. Cycles you've repeated across lifetimes. The same dynamics, the same addictions, the same inner wars. They simply lose their grip. Not because you conquered them, but because you remembered who you were beneath them. There is no need to fix anymore. What once felt like identity now feels like dust gently brushing off your skin. Karma doesn't need to be cleared. It has simply run its course. You move forward not by resisting the past, but by no longer needing it to define you. You don't react the way you used to. You don't spiral the way you used to. You don't get stuck in places that once swallowed you whole. It's not that challenges disappear, but you respond to them from a different place now. A place of stillness, a place of wisdom. A place that doesn't need to learn the lesson anymore because it already is the integration. Sign 11, when you become the answer you were searching for. There is a stillness that begins to take root inside you. Not the stillness of inaction, but of presence. You are no longer asking, "What is my purpose?" Because you've realized your being is the purpose. Not what you build, not what you achieve, not even what you heal, but the quiet light you carry without trying. You don't need to be known to feel complete. You don't need to be praised to feel worthy. You don't need to do anything grand to feel sacred. You walk into rooms and shift the atmosphere, not because of charisma, but because your presence is empty of striving. You live with an open heart, not for virtue, but because anything less now feels dishonest. Your very existence becomes a quiet blessing, a soft glow in the background of other people's storms, not by design, but by remembrance. There's nothing left to prove. No more spiritual ladders to climb. No more truths to grasp. You are the flame, not the one chasing sparks. You are no longer the seeker. You are what the seeker was always searching for. The deeper this presence settles within you, the less you feel like you're becoming something, and the more you feel like you're returning to what was always true. There is no rush now, no final breakthrough to chase. Only this breath, only this stillness, only this silent knowing. You are home, even while you walk the earth. You don't need anyone to confirm it for you. There is a knowing inside you now that doesn't ask for proof. Not in words, not in visions, but in how your body breathes differently, how your eyes rest on the world with gentler questions, how your soul no longer clings to outcomes, only to presence. This is what it feels like to near the end of the cycle. Not an end in darkness, but a dissolving into light. Not an escape, but an arrival. You begin to live in both places at once. Part of you here, loving, laughing, feeling. Part of you already beyond the veil, watching, waiting, welcoming. You are not finished with life, but life is no longer your teacher. It is your expression. You move through this world not to gather more experience, but to walk gently with the experiences you've already earned. Every interaction becomes sacred. Every goodbye becomes eternal. Every sunrise becomes a memory before it even sets. You are not trying to ascend anymore. You are simply remembering you never truly left. There is no more seeking, no more fixing, no more striving to become. You are no longer shaped by karma. You are moved by grace, not to prove, not to preach, but to love in the quietest, most invisible way. You don't need a title for it. You don't need to be recognized for it. You just are. A soul completing its walk across time. And though no trumpet sounds, though no banner waves to mark this holy moment, something in the eternal remembers. You will not return here again, not because you failed, but because you fulfilled. And what awaits is not reward, not heaven, not a throne, but the soft returning to the one who never left you, to the light that dreamed itself into form, just to learn how to love as you. So if you have seen yourself in these signs, if the ache, the stillness, the strange knowing has lived in you for as long as you can remember, then you already know the truth. This is your last life on earth, and you are not ending. You are blooming. You are not departing. You are dissolving into everything. You are not gone. you are finally home.